Hey everyone and welcome. In this video we look at an article on the Mail Online where Douglas Murray gives a perfect analysis of the culture revolution we are seeing played out in our workplaces, media, and now our streets. It is a long article, and rightly so, but it is very, very important to understand what is going on. I have the utmost respect for Douglas and his insistence in talking about things most are scared to. It's titled, Douglas Murray, Anarchy is Breaking Out, where are the brakes on this thing? Does anyone know? Today, a rabble of overweight tattooed thugs hurled insults, cans and bottles at the police. Officers with shields and riot gear scrambled to contain the violence a short walk from the heart of government. Now, before you kick off, Douglas isn't saying everyone there was a, and I quote, rabble of overweight tattooed thugs. He means the handful of idiots that were trying to kick off. And if you are one of those, I'm disappointed. You were there to protect, not get drunk and leery. You just helped the MSM. Sorry, just my opinion. Much love and honour goes to the vets and the workers there to do a duty. I thank you for your service. Again. Anyway, on with Douglas's wise words. Let's read. This was coordinated law breaking. We are supposed to be in lockdown, remember. Confined to our homes while the R rate hovers close to 1. But the rioting was all too predictable from the moment the police, politicians and other prominent figures decided to indulge the Black Lives Matter demonstrations all around Britain last weekend. At the start, many of the BLM campaigners had a noble cause, yet their gatherings were in defiance of lockdown guidance and spilled over into violence and destruction. Yes, they did. I'm not too sure how many coppers were injured, but it was a lot. Police officers were injured, property was destroyed, the smell of double standards is hard to avoid. Exactly, Douglas. This is the main issue. This is why I think it kicked off a little bit yesterday. When BLM were protesting violently, the police were out in small numbers, dressed in normal everyday uniform. When workers and veterans turn up to protect, not to kick off violence, to protect, they turned up in the morning, first thing, already in riot gear. But anyway, I digress, we'll continue. Yesterday, the police behaved as they should. Properly equipped, they contained a lawless mob and protected public property. Yes, they did. They did an okay job, Albert, I will say that. Apart from some of the disgusting stuff at the end. Politicians and commentators were outspoken in their criticism of the thugs. But where were they last weekend? The politicians were calling the protesters peaceful or even praising them. And the police in some cases not only kneeled before the mob, but then as it turned violent, ran away from them. We've all seen the video, haven't we? No wonder people were angry at that sight. Angry? It inflamed a lot of things. Because even though they were doing those shocking actions on video, everybody in the establishment were praising them. You see the double standard? Permitted lawlessness only encourages more of the same and adds to the madness in the air at the moment. Anarchy is breaking out. Where are the brakes on this thing? Does anyone know? Why is it that the cenotaph in Whitehall must be boarded up and the statue of Winston Churchill? How did a debate on police racism in the US turn into an attack on almost everything in Britain's past? Not to mention protests and now counter-protests and rioting across European cities. This is a very dangerous moment. I fully agree with Douglas all the way up until now, but what say you? Yes, some part of the current unrest is a reaction to the lockdown. There are consequences when you consign the whole country to our homes for nearly 3 months. It is also true there are segments of the population who feel racism is the single most important issue in our country. They portray Great Britain as a hellhole, a vile society with white supremacy and institutional racism everywhere. An even greater part of the population profoundly disagrees. Yes, because we're not racist, it isn't a hellhole, and we're not a vile society with white supremacy and institutional racism, in my opinion. Try and prove me wrong. But where is the debate? How did protests against a policeman killing an unarmed black man in Minnesota last month lead to the cancelling of faulty towers, the destruction of statues, and assaults on police by 2 different sets of thugs? The fact is that police chiefs set a dreadful example last weekend, standing by in the face of mass law breaking, and I think that was probably one of the main fuelers of all of the trouble yesterday, to be honest. I saw a video where they were segregating veterans. They wouldn't let all of the veterans get to the cenotaph to protect it. But they don't show you that on the mainstream media, do they? They're just slamming everyone that was there as far-right extremists. Am I wrong? Why? Because like our old society, they fear that opposing any action by BLM will lead to accusations of racism. And now we see the consequence of this retreat from reason. The destruction of our monuments, mob rule on our streets and festering hatred on the internet. What happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis Minneapolis was appalling, and most of the world, if not all of the world, agrees 100% with that, and we all came out straight away and called it out for the disgusting action that it was. The arresting policeman's actions were callous, brutal and indefensible. Completely agree. But why have people decided to apportion the blame so far and wide? These protesters are using the actions of a policeman in Minnesota currently charged with murder and awaiting trial to push for the erasure of British history and culture. What we are seeing is nothing less than an attempt to reshape Britain in the image of militant groups and the ideologues of the far left. I agree fully with that. And to do so, they are crushing debate and punishing dissent using classic tactics of moral intimidation. Across the country, people fear that remaining silent is somehow to support the violence meted out to George Floyd. An oboe recital on Radio 3 was interrupted by a trembling speech about his killing. A presenter on the BBC Two's Spring Watch used the return of the wild beaver to Cornwall to use as a counterpoint to events in Minnesota, speaking out against BLM as Nigel Farage did last week, and you might lose your job as he did. People learn from such punishments and shaming, and most of the media, like everybody else, has been intimidated into agreeing with the protest for fear of seeming to condone racism. I'm not too sure that is the case in that regard though, Douglas. That's the only part of it that I actually disagree with. I think they are actually having a circle wank over this, to be honest. I think they are over the moon that all of this is happening because they are the ones that are instigating it. They are the ones that are running race through every single story now, are they not? I don't think it's got anything to do with being called racist. They want to call everybody else racists. Why has our culture become like this? Are we communist Eastern Europe, where people have to condemn people with whom they are associated in case they are condemned in turn? Whatever happened to polite disagreement or healthy debate? The crowd behaviour at the statue of Edward Colston in Bristol last weekend was deranged, and I agree. Did you see it? They're all mental. Whatever the rights and wrong of the statue, the manner in which it came down was shocking. I actually think we should open asylums for those sort of people, but what say you? That would be good. I think that's probably the reason why we've got so many of these nut jobs running the streets, to be honest. Even more shocking was the fact that the police stood by, with police chiefs justifying that decision and the city's mayor congratulating the mob on their actions. He did as well, exactly. The move was deeply significant because we know from history that at such moments crowds of this kind are interested in one thing above all: testing the limits, seeing how far they are permitted to go. In failing to realise this, the police's top command, Cressida Dick, we're looking at you when we're saying this, have been cowards. Since then, we have seen attempts to bring down statues of the founder of the Scouts, Robert Baden-Powell, and the renaming of buildings in Liverpool named after Gladstone, and the anti-statue movement has spread outward. Gone with the Wind has gone from streaming service for Ron Think, as have comedy series like Little Britain and The Legal Gentleman. Can anyone explain convincingly why things made only a decade ago are now so threatening? No, any more than we can explain how any child in Britain of whatever ethnic background is going to benefit from this demented cultural purge. Members of Minneapolis City Council have announced their intention to dismantle the city's police department, as though American cities have not just had a taste of what a loss of law and order looks like. Yep, they're burning. One member of the City Council, Jeremiah Ellison, announced a dramatic rethink on how we approach public safety. Perhaps he and his colleagues could set up a committee on public safety, as Robespierre and co did after the French Revolution, with such striking success. If pushed, America could well find itself amid another revolution. As it is in America, so it could be here. Not least because there has been a near total absence of authority so far. This country needs to recognise what we are facing. Oh, we recognise on the internet, Douglas. That's why we're all starting to scream about it. Yes, there are some people genuinely protesting because of Minnesotan policing. Others are just happy to get out of the house and be praised for their nobility in doing so. Virtue signallers. We know where that one's pointed, don't we? But among them lie people with the most hostile imaginable view of this country. People who will not stop until they have trashed all of our history and forced everyone into feeling some undue sense of shame over it. They and the vacuum left by our political leaders have now created a counterforce, one that thanks to its thuggery will give further ammunition to their opponents. Well, count me out. I am proud of our history. Like millions of other British people, I have my own attitudes and criticisms towards part of it, and I am open to debating it all. But I don't see why these cultural revolutionaries should be able to push their one-sided hostile version of our country unopposed. If they do, I worry deeply about what greater reaction they might produce. This nation has been an extraordinary force for good in the world. If it hadn't been, and we weren't the tolerant country that we are, then why would people from all over the world have come here and want to come here still? Like all countries, including America, there are things we can do to improve. Nobody doubts that. But we can't leave our future to the rule of mobs, neither to the thugs of yesterday, nor to the anti-racists who would destroy our economy and erase every aspect of our culture that isn't to their liking. My opinion? We are in a culture war and it's invading everything, it's infesting it even. We cannot and will not win on the streets. Yesterday proved that and the media's response to it. It will only speed this insanity up in my opinion. What we need to do is shout loud and proud, on social media, in the workplace, everywhere. The left have shut down the debate and discussion format. Time to open it up again, whether they like it or not. We need to show our resilience and courage into defending our history and our way of life, not with violence, but with words. We need to talk about the hard subjects again, even if they might silence us. Tell your friends, family, anyone that will listen, and even ones that won't, that we are not racist. We are proud English, Irish, Welsh and Scottish. We are British and we are not ashamed of our past or our future. Also, the bias in the MSM media is now full on lefty propaganda. My strong suggestion, if you haven't already, is cancel your license, direct debit, stop paying to be lied and manipulated to. But anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the very interesting critique of why things are going wrong at the moment. In regards to protesting on the streets, we're never going to come out of that one looking good, so I think we should change our tactics and do it by words instead. But what say, I'd like to know your opinions on this one. Thanks to everyone that stayed right to the end. I appreciate you sticking with it. It was well worth it, wasn't it? Stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.